Hello, Stephen White, Steve Arts 89. I just watched It, the original miniseries. Now, I spent the last 3 nights watching It. I watched the first one on DVD. I'd seen in the cinema, but I wanted to see the second part in the cinema, and I could not remember much about watching it the first time. So I figured, well, I have to watch it again. So I watched it, and then last night I went out and saw the film, and tonight, the idea was to watch the original miniseries, and then tomorrow, or I'll start tonight, but tomorrow, um, I'll finish up listening to the audio book, which I have as a video. So then I'm going to do a little comparison of all three versions, because I'm very curious to see what parts. I know there's a few videos of this already on YouTube, but I want to have a look at what parts are different between the book and the miniseries. Now, the miniseries, because the book is 1,138 pages, I bought it and never attempted to read it when I was younger. I started off reading with Stephen King books. My first novel I ever read was Misery, and I wanted to read it, but it was just too long. And I'd already seen the miniseries, so I knew what happened, and I just never did it. So I kind of just disappointed I never actually read it. But originally, the TV series, miniseries, was going to be a 4-part, 8-hour miniseries, which I'm guessing that's including ads. So it would have been less actual minutes. But it was supposed to be 4 parts, four TV movies, basically, of 2 hours. But then, and that was originally, oh God, who was involved? Night of the Living Dead, George A. Romero was going to be directing it. He dropped out, and then they cut it down to 3 parts, and then they brought on Tommy Lee Wallace, who turned it into 2 parts. So apparently the network really wanted to do it, but they were kind of scared of it, and they eventually sort of chickened out and just cut it down to just 2 hours and just gave it, 2 nights, and gave it 2 hour parts, so 4 hours of TV time, 3 hours of actual running time. They spent $12 million on it though. They spent 3 months filming it back in 1990, and then it screened November 18 in 1990. So I don't know when I saw it. I thought I saw it in 1990, but I can't imagine it was on video in Australia that quickly after being on TV in America. So I might have actually seen it later than that. I remember watching it as one video. I can't remember if it was 2 parts on one video or if they'd edited it together as one film, because I was kind of surprised to find out it was 2 parts. But I don't remember because I've seen it in different forms since then. But in America, it was 2 separate parts, 2 videotapes, and then later on, 1998, I think they did a version where it was edited into one version where they cut off the end credits for one episode, the first part, and the starting credits for the second part, and just made it into one film where it basically just fades to black and goes to the next scene. And apparently that's the version that's been released ever since on DVD, which includes the Australian release. Now, the Australian release was split into it was on 2 discs, so it splits at the same point. It just fades to black at the last shot after Stan kills himself, and then the next disc just starts off from after where the credit scene was, where Bill, or what's his name, is going to Georgie's grave. The Blu-ray, which was released in Australia as well, has the whole film start to finish with no gap, but it's in full frame. Now, the DVD is in widescreen, and when you watch it, the difference is like a lot of full frame and widescreen versions. They filmed one aspect and they cropped both. So for the widescreen, they cropped a little bit off the top and the bottom, and for the full frame, they cropped a bit off the sides. So neither version has the whole picture. So had they rescanned the original film version for the Blu-ray, they could have almost filled the whole screen and had the full frame, although the full frame might not have been framed properly anyway, because since they were planning to do it as a TV special and then a video release, there may have been things on the side that were never supposed to be seen, or maybe they filmed it clean so it could be cropped and put into cinemas. That might have been another idea, because it does transition very well to a widescreen version. So I've watched the DVD version, the widescreen DVD version, because I just liked that better than the DVD version, which the Blu-ray version, which I actually thought they had just cropped the sides off. So I thought I was getting more picture. I was getting a little bit more, but I was also losing some, which is a bit of a problem. I'm a bit anal about aspects, and I really wish they would just give us the full aspect for things as they were filmed, and not stick to either the original aspect, whether it was widescreen or full frame for TV, because I'd rather have an odd amount of black on either side and get the full side and top of the image, unless it was never meant to be, unless it was not filmed that way and wasn't never meant to be seen. So I'll probably end up watching the Blu-ray later on just to see if there's any difference or if it makes any difference. But so that's all the technical stuff. Back to the actual story. It's so much better than the new films, and I know that's cliche. The guy who grew up watching the show saying the original is better than the new ones, but I'm more than happy to take on something new that is good. The remake of Friday the 13th I actually really liked because it was dark and scary as fuck, and Jason was running and just scary, and I'm fine with that because he was scary in some of the earlier films before he kind of became too iconic to be really taken seriously, and a lot of people were just rooting for him to kill people, unlike the first couple of films where you're rooting for the actual people to live. So there's that sort of situation where you kind of get used to it, and I don't think I'm falling into that trap too much. Because there are things about the new films that don't work so well. They're very adult films, and the children don't really get to be children in the films. There's a lot of and I don't know if this is in the novel, but there's a lot of adultness. Whereas in this film, the kids were very much kids, and they were very innocent, and you felt their vulnerability, and I think you were worried about them. You wanted them to survive. You felt Pennywise felt such a threat to them. Whereas these kids, Pennywise just, it just doesn't work. I think the innocence, you needed that. And of course, innocence is bad. Everything has to be dark and serious and adult and sexual, and kids aren't allowed to be kids anymore because that's just immature and juvenile apparently. So and naive, and that's like a 90s, like that's I'm not impressed with kind of the current over sophistication of some horror characters. I find they try too hard, and there's no fun, there's no innocence, you can't just enjoy the characters. It's all I'm going too much into generalizations because I'm not really happy with the state of horror at the moment. But so there's a few little things that really stuck out to me, like when first off, the monsters. Now in the new films, they have these really ridiculous CGI monsters that you can't take seriously. In the original, they actually, for starters, they used the classic Universal monsters, the Wolfman and the Mummy, and that took some licensing and money, I imagine. And these were characters that were in the popular culture, and they were kind of icons that people were afraid of, or represented things that they were afraid of. So that makes sense. Now, in the new films, had they used, say, Freddy and Jason and contemporary characters that were coming alive to attack these children, it'd be great. But of course, then they'd have to pay New Line Cinema and whoever owns whatever characters. So they didn't do that. They stuck Nightmare on Elm Street 5 up on the cinema thing that's saying it was showing at the time. They showed that, I think, twice in the film, or once in each film. And also to suggest that they were going for a kind of Nightmare on Elm Street fantasy sort of vibe, but they didn't actually put the money into showing any of those characters on screen. They just made up these really, really lame, generic. There's this woman who turns into a monster with pendulous boobs, and she's like ancient, and it's just kind of ageist and misogynistic in a way, and it's just it's not scary because apparently the female form and age is supposed to be horrifying or something. It's just kind of insulting, and it doesn't really work at all. I wasn't exactly scared by the. I was more scared by the Wolfman in it than the CGI long-legged, pendulous-boobed running thing that was supposed to be scary in it. It didn't work for me. And a lot of the things that happen, they feel very much like it is playing with the world around them. It's not necessarily a fantasy world or imagination or delusion. It's more it manipulating things. Even though we know only they can see it, he still seems to be distorting reality as opposed to just putting them into like an unreality. So that sort of works as well, because I think it works better for the story, but also visually it feels more real and more of a threat than just being in CGI world, and that doesn't work for me either. What's next? And there's a lot of little parts where in the original the kids got to connect and be to bond when they're building the dam in the Barrens, and when they're at the cinema and just doing a lot of just kid things and hanging out and that all works a lot better, and you feel that they're a group and you sort of just relate to them more. Whereas in the new film, I never really felt like we got time to see these kids being kids and relate to them that way. So I think there's a lot of things about the new films that didn't work, and I've gone into a lot of that with the second one in the other video. If anyone watched that, I don't know. I'm just talking. I just wanted to look at the whole thing and kind of look at all the parts, and I don't know, I enjoy this. And I've already gone into the stupid ritual and all of that in the second film, and there's no sign of that in this film, and I don't know if they took it from the book or they just made it up. If it's in the book, I can forgive them for trying to be true to what King did, but if they made it up, they just ruined that second film for no reason. So that's why I want to listen to the audiobook to actually see if they've taken stuff from the books or if they just made it up themselves and did a Game of Thrones where they just abandoned the original source material or ran out of original source material as they did and made up their own stuff and weren't capable of matching the original. So what else is there? One thing that bugged me also about the new film was that they made the black kid really tragic. His family were junkies or whatever, he got killed in a fire, and in the original he was the one who researched it and he was the one who helped with all that. In this new film he took that on after Ben left, but he wasn't the one that originated it. So I feel like they lessened his character, and it was very kind of stereotypical and kind of racist, and not surprised in today's America that they actually went backwards, and the 90s version was actually more forward thinking than this version, even though it was set in the 80s and that was set in the 60s. Yeah, so that was one part that I had heard about online. A lot of people criticised how they treated the character, and I totally agreed with it, but that was really the only thing I sort of knew going into the film. So I was fairly objective, and I wasn't really impressed with it. And nor was anyone else I spoke to. And I had trouble getting excited about the new film. That's why I took 2 weeks to see it. And I did enjoy it on some levels, but it let itself down in the same ways. And there was a whole subplot that just wasted time and was repetitive, and they did the same thing over twice in the film, and it didn't need to be 2.5 hours long. I don't know why they had to do that, why they felt they had to be that long and try and create some sort of endgame epic. They really just needed to do another hour and a half and maybe 2 hours at the most, and just really stick to the kids coming back as adults, confronting it and confronting their own issues and and dealing with his distorting reality and fantasy and all that, and just really do that well instead of just repetitively going over and over the same scenarios over and over again. But I'm going to leave that there. I'm just going to go and watch the audiobooks and work out the differences and see what I think of that. But if you've watched this, thanks for listening, and feel free to let me know if you disagree with anything or what you think of the film, and I'll see you all later.